What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Thirsty Thursday. And last month it just wasn't enough, right? I had our friend Buckleboy on. We had some fun, gave away some books, spread a little bit of knowledge, but in no way, shape, or form was there enough time to kind of dive into this. So, especially while this book is kind of hot and everybody's going through it, I'm probably going to invite every time I get about 10 or 15 good questions or so, I'm probably going to harass him like no other to come back up and talk a little bit because, we were just discussing off air that, this was one of those things that 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have no reference, not a lot of good reference. We were having to do a lot of research and go in that route. Gonna say hi to a few people really fast. Also, I want you guys to keep in mind, I got a very special guest that's going to be here around 9:30. That's going to share a story of a metal detecting find that just recently happened, and you're not going to believe how it kind of turned out. And hopefully, he explains it the way I want him to, so that that it kind of you can see the rise in excitement after it was cleaned up and what he thought and what he thought he had. So just a couple of quick hellos, and then I will grab Mr. Plummer. Neil was in here first. Iron Antler, thank you. Kevin Hawthorne, Bone Dead Heathens, all you guys, I appreciate y'all very much. Just kind of everybody is usually here, so we'll just say hello to everybody. Much love to everybody in the group. Tom, thank you for 34 months. I appreciate you. I hopefully you guys know how much you all mean to me and how much this community means. So, but without further ado, any questions that you have for Buckleboy, please go ahead and direct them to me in the chat. I will try to keep up with them. Also, if you have a relic that you want identified or looked at today, hit me up on Instant Messenger. That might be the easiest way, or the email address going across the bottom of the screen. But please make sure I see it because sometimes the chat goes by super fast. Happy Thursday, Phasmophobia later. Ooh, that sounds like a good idea, Wayne. We might play some games tonight after we're done. That does sound like a good time. But here we go. Without further ado, Mr. William Plummer, Buckleboy, like I said, get them questions out because this man's going to answer them today. He's going to get you set straight on your relics.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's getting, like I said, I think it's going to end up being a little bit of a harassment session within the coming months. Probably by middle of April, he's going to see my instant messages come up, and I think I'm probably going to be straight up blocked on Facebook. That's okay.
That's all right, man. That's all right.
I do want to, and tonight I'm going to ask a lot, and it's going to be a lot of questions that I have or a lot of things that I have questions about, and I want to get into certain things. But I briefly mentioned a few minutes ago when you and I were talking, and the whole everybody loves coins. That's a given. Gold coins are something I do want to talk a little bit about later, but where did this token phenomenon come from? And how was that kind of come about? And what do you know about the creation of that kind of aspect of currency, like in rural America in the mid 1800s?
Well, I think, if you were going to buy something, a lot of times, if there wasn't currency around in a lot of the rural areas, you would just barter and trade. And I know that in the early American frontier, which would have been really the Appalachian Mountains and West, right? In the very early days, I think a lot of people just bartered and traded. And, there's a couple of ways to do that. I mean, you could offer goods and take goods, but you could also, write an IOU or a simple document or something. But a lot of people really couldn't write then. So one of the ways to do that was tokens. And it seems like a lot of these tokens, fall into multiple categories, like hard times tokens. When there wasn't currency, tokens kind of stood in for currency. Or in the case of good for tokens, when there was, practices where like I would give my hard-earned nickel and the thing cost 2.5 cents, not because it should, but because that was one way that they could take my nickel and give me back a worthless token that was good for another one of whatever I just bought, instead of that way they keep the nickel and they don't care if I bring the token back. So there's those types of things too, with those good for tokens and script and things like that, where you're not actually being paid in currency. You're being paid in effect what you can spend at a company or business owned store. So there's a lot of those types of weird meanderings of tokens as well. And of course, during the Civil War period, that they were advertising pieces. The 1840s, 50s, 60s. Even 1830s, a lot of these were advertising pieces. Even the hard times tokens, they weren't political pieces. They were just like made by a business to promote themselves.
Yeah, like some of the tokens that, like specifically the hard times tokens, were they actually counterfeits, or did they? Because a lot of them looked like actual coins and they were just inscripted on.
Yeah, so a lot of them seem like they were made to exploit, the current coin designs. So you'll see like the coronet, Liberty, on one side, or you'll see an eagle on the back or something. But they're not. Usually, they're not both sides. And I think part of that was because there wasn't any law against that back then. Even counterfeiting ran rampant until the Secret Service was established. To deal with that.
Yeah, first and foremost, the guy to post this one, Miss Rachel, wants to know if Buckleboy is looking forward to having lunch with Jersey Ray Diggs, hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, sure. If you're passing through, give a shout. We'll make something happen.
Listen, Rachel, I thought he was going to say only if you're buying.
Well, that too.
Yeah. So, and continuing with that, just a little bit more, like coin or like tokens themselves. A token. I mean, I know everybody was kind of a craftsman. There was a blacksmith shop, with every so many miles. But who started because some of them were very unique. Some of the ones from that mid 1800s, especially into the late and early 1900s, they're very original looking coins, very nicely made, stuff like that. Where were they getting these made at, or were they making them themselves?
I think in many cases there were a fair number of these that the dies were sunk in, like the Northeast, like the Connecticut, a lot of these button manufacturers, they had the skills they had the rollers to roll out the brass to the right thickness. They could cut it to the right circular, size, and they had the die engravers to be able to do a lot of this stuff. Now, that said, I do think a lot of these things also came from overseas. There's examples of like brothel tokens that have like the Liberty from the 1 cent coin that were made in France. I think they came from all over. And, these tokens, like, we tend to think of tokens as like starting like in the 1800s for our country, but there's a long history of jettons, going back in Europe, hundreds of years. So, the idea of not having a legal currency and using a token to pay for goods or exchange for a service is not unheard of.
Yeah, so I primarily, like in rural communities where coins and currency didn't exactly make it to, everybody kind of had to help each other survive, and that just maybe it became a means of their own kind of independent currency. Did towns and such do stuff like that, or was that just kind of because like I said, the companies that were like the mining companies, that's the ones I know is because what is it? I sold my soul to the company store.
Yeah, 16 tons.
Yeah, I mean, you just think about all of that. So these companies that were mining coal, we'll just use coal miners because I know I got a couple really nice coal tokens. These people worked long hours and they got paid in company script, and then they're spending their money at the company store. Man, if that's the best way to become a millionaire, I don't know what else is to own those kind of companies.
Yeah.
For just helping with survival. I think that's another really cool part of it. The coins. What year was it when we stopped accepting foreign currency in the United States? 1850?
57, maybe somewhere around in there. Somebody in the chat can find that. I bet somebody knows. I would say 1857, but I'm not sure.
And so did they denote value by weight at that point in time? Like if you had a silver half real, was that considered like a dime? I mean, how did they determine value of that?
Well, the silver coins, the half reals, those I want to say, because of silver content and weight, they were almost like 12 and a half cents for, like 25 cents, 12 and a half cents, right? So 6.25 cents, rather than a half dime. I want to say they were like bigger slightly in diameter, the half reals. So, like if you follow that down, 25 cents, 12 and a half cents, really, the denominations don't work out, right? And I forget the differences in terms of weight, but everybody, basically would just trade those at whatever weight and silver value they were. So pretty fascinating history there.
Yeah, different trading posts and stuff like that. It's just kind of, just thinking that this country as a new country had to accept currency from other places because everybody was immigrants. They got here, setting up your own currency as a country. I think it's a nice hodgepodge mix of how things worked. Want to change the topic just a hair. uh, the one thing I keep going back to things that we find, and a lot of things that we find in old home sites. The hardware, the keys, the locks. I know the other day I mentioned when somebody in one of those chats that we were in asked me about what my favorite chapter of your book was. I immediately refer to the locks and the keys because that place has a serious affection to me. So weren't they easy to pick? I mean, like weren't they easy? I mean, I know they were big and robust, but the whole breaking and entering thing had a lot of different, easier ways back then. How do you look at that whole era?
Yeah, I think, and I'm not an expert in different lock types, but I've studied enough to write this book. And from what I can tell, there's a whole spectrum. So a lot of like the smaller locks, like what people called Mickey Mouse locks. People used to say they were from the 1700s. They could be Georgian, but really like kind of late, like George III maybe, and probably early Victorian, maybe William. So that kind of span of time, up into about the 1830s. But those locks, a lot of times, those didn't even have any sort of really security on them. You can find Mickey Mouse locks that don't even have a keyhole. And the reason why is because they had this little panel where you would move the panel over to one side and it would just pop the top. So it was almost like a trick lock. And in my book, I actually ID those for the first time. They've not been identified in a book previously as to what those Mickey Mouse locks are. So that would be like the extremely non-secure way to store anything. People would always say, "Oh, there's little brass locks. They run like money chests and stuff like that." And I'm like, that's absolutely the worst lock that you could have. A lock where literally you don't even need the key because there's no keyhole. You just slide the dust cover over and it pops the shackle open. Then the smokehouse locks, those were fairly low security as well. They were basically just a deterrent. You just basically hoped that if somebody wanted to pick that lock, then they would be standing around trying it for long enough that they might get caught, or they might just decide not to do that in the first place. And then I think once you start to get these, double warded and brass locks that are like, the pancake style locks, and some of those with the push keys, those really start to be kind of high security locks that you really can't get into unless you have the key or you cut it off.
Now, I know I discussed it a little bit with you last time that you were here, but one of my favorite finds, and I know I've discussed this before, is there was a fort that was built to protect a town from, so that they could have a post office. And the U.S. military sent Revolutionary War veterans to my area, and they built this, I don't know, like a stone fort, not really big, but it was set to protect the town. And one of the officers that came with that, when they built his house, the lock and key was something that he had brought in with him, because when I got it identified, it was early 1700s, made in England,
Wow.
and
Wow.
it was an iron key. So And I didn't know that about those things. The fact that they took the locks with them when they moved. I guess they had significant value to them. I guess there was something that the raw materials, and to have something fabricated at that time was such a chore that they took them with them. Um, so that's how I know that some of these items end up here from these old houses. Uh, but the key is itself is just, it's completely worn out at this point, but it's still 100% intact, and it's almost 300 and some change years later, 400 years, whatever it's been. Um, I didn't know. How did I not know that people took their locks with them? And is that a common thing?
Well, I would say that people were more conscious of materials and possessions then than they are now. We have a lot of stuff nowadays, and when you dig a trash pit at an old home, you're not just finding stuff from the past. You're finding everything that however many generations of people had used and discarded, and you can dig all of it up in sometimes 3 or 4 return trips, or a lot of it up. You think about what we throw away and don't have a use for or dispose of. And, like, 1 year you'd be digging all day to dig up the stuff that, one family discards today. So I think people had a different relationship with the things they own. But I also think that, people would even sometimes take nails, if a house burned down, they would sometimes rake the coals, rake the ashes to get the nails back out to reuse. So it doesn't surprise me in the least that somebody would take a lock and key. People don't realize that we didn't have access to these raw materials here in this country. And by that, I mean gold, silver, copper, mainly. We had access to lead. We had access to iron, but we didn't have access to, certainly silver until the Comstock lode. We didn't have access to gold until the gold rush. And we didn't have access to copper really until some of the mines up in Michigan started opening, and I guess around the 1830s. So every bit of those raw materials was either, if you dig up something that was made by an American silversmith, for example, say around 1800, 1810, then that silver was from melted down Spanish silver coins. It was from 1700s or 1600s or older jewelry, or from imported items. So every bit of that metal had a previous life, which is pretty awesome to think about.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, yeah, you just don't know where the silver came from, especially when we didn't have it. You're right, when we didn't have it in this country. What is the early coin or the early piece of silverware made? What silver was it made from? So that's a really cool as well. Patty asked if I found an aluminum token from a nearby town. It's really hard to read. Is there something I can do to clean it?
Well, a token collector might slap my hand for this, but an aluminum token, to me, if it's covered in aluminum rot and it's all crusty and you can't identify it, is not really worth anything until you can identify it. Now, the best method I would say is probably sandblasting it with some sort of media like a walnut shell. But I don't own a sandblaster box, so I would have to borrow that from somebody. But what I've found has good success for me is getting a brass bristle brush, and I mean, like, make sure it's brass bristle. Like, if it rusts on you, or if a magnet picks it up, it's not brass. It's brass plated iron. Make sure it's solid brass, otherwise you'll destroy your token. But a dot of dish soap, and take that brass bristle brush and go over it, and just stop when you can read enough to be able to ID that token. That's my best advice.
Yeah, aluminum tokens are kind of tricky. Sometimes you can make them worse really, really fast. And I know that a lot of the collectors, just like coins, cleaning a coin, any kind of collector will just tell you to leave it at the hell, they'll leave it the hell alone for the most part. But you're right, it's no good to you unless you know what it is.
Mhm.
Um, our special guest has made it into the chat, and I'm going to save him for just a few more minutes. Hopefully, he can be a little bit patient down there. But it's going to lead me into a topic a lot like the tokens topic. The one of the primary finds that anybody ever comes across anywhere when you find an old house or old site is buttons. And going through the history of buttons and how they were made, and the whole progression from the 1600s all the way up until the early 1900s with when you were in the two-piece button era is really interesting. What are some of your favorite buttons and some of them that come from and kind of explain how that they the manufacturers how they why they stamped them the way they did and stuff like that, just to because there's a lot of different ones out there, and most of the ones that we find were brought over from England.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a fascinating history. Some of my favorite ones actually are pewter buttons, because even though they often don't, turn up in great shape unless you're in the water. But pewter buttons, that those buttons were probably cast in a mold. They were usually made in America here long before we made much of anything else. And pewter was readily available. That's why you have, pewter smiths that also worked in silver for like high-end customers. And also could shape copper and various other things. But pewter was easily moldable, easily craftable. A person, even in their own house, could pour a pewter spoon. So you sometimes find, very rarely you'll find a pewter spoon mold that's made out of brass, where people have been making their own spoons on site. So I just think that kind of like making something on site is really special when you find evidence of that. And that goes for like buttons made out of shell, like abalone shell. If you find the shells that have the cutout circles on them where they've been, where the shell's been removed to craft buttons, or lead buttons, buttons that have been just basically a flattened poker chip with some sew holes, bored through. Any button that's been repurposed, I think, is really cool. Sometimes you'll find like a big dandy button or something that has a hole punched in it so that somebody could suspend it from their neck. So I just think that these kind of repurposed items really have an extra story to tell.
Yeah, I love. I only got to make the one trip to upstate New York. Us and some of the Monday Digs guys, we all got to go up there together. The finding your first British colonial coin, that's always a win. But the dandy buttons, oh my gosh, that was something that I hadn't found here in Indiana and Kentucky area so much. But the one that I found there, man, you even at 9 or 10 inches deep, you can't miss it with your detector. It sounds like $1 million. Well, it sounds like a nickel, but it sounded like $1 million. I mean, it was loud and huge. Talking about the buttons, I've got, the military buttons are very, they're very interesting as well. I have a 1830s silver plated infantry officer's button, and I found mine before Kurt from the Hoover Boys did, by the way, because I had to figure out what it was, and then about 3 months later, that boy found one, and I was mad because then everybody was like, "Well, that's just such a great find," and I didn't realize how great it was at the time. Military buttons are very interesting, and there were so many like private regiments in areas, and we'll say militias, and put together, especially in the early 1800s. How did they come up with the means to make all those buttons for those uniforms?
Yeah, I think they must have just sent in an order to one of the button manufacturers, and that would have been an interesting dialogue if those letters survived ever. I mean, you'd had to explain what you wanted via letter and say, I want the design to be like this. It'd be like, I want the turkey as a design, and you get something that looks like your hand with a beak on it. It's like, you think about a game of telephone, but it's like, these people would have written back and forth and basically had to describe what kind of insignia that they wanted. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. There's a town in northern Oklahoma that got poisoned from digging lead. It's been on TV. Lead mines were real important in the Civil War. There was a lot of skirmishes over like Arkansas lead mines. I know that much. That had a lot to do with Morgan's Raiders and looking for that gold. That's another really cool story. That not 40 miles west of here, that cache of gold coins that was found in the farmer's field, that was really close.
That's amazing.
It was really, really close. And I know that guy they did a really nice job of not letting out where that exactly was. I know what county and I know pretty close where, but you know, Morgan's Raiders was an interesting story because of them traveling to, you know, to try to cut off Union Gold to going, and I think it was traveling to the lead factories for bullets for the war. I mean, or the lead factories, the mines out there and out west. I hear all stuff. I read stories like that all the time. And you know, Josh Gates they were here next to us, just about 40 miles north of here, going through looking through the lost caves and stuff like that. Even though there's not a lot of old history here, there's a lot of really cool history in this area. But when, you know, when we're speaking about history, uh, I'm going to bring up my guest, and I want him to tell his story the way he told it to me the other day, with the initial excitement, and I want him to go through and kind of let everybody understand what the rise of emotions that he went through. You guys probably haven't seen him in a hot minute on a live stream. I can't remember the last time I seen him, but I'd like to welcome in my good friend Jerry from oh my gosh, the other side of the boat. How you doing, sir?
Doing great.
All right. Oh, he's a little quiet. Is that your mic? Let's see.
Let's see what we got turned on. Oh, I am on there.
All right, here you go. Let me see how you are now. Maybe that was
better?
just me. Yeah, that's better because I'm
right,
I'm a
perfect.
loudmouth. I get that.
That's
So just to kind of set the tone here, Jerry digs a lot, and then usually every once in a while he'll come across something, and my phone will blow up like on a Saturday morning, and all of a sudden I'll see some picture of a nice coin, and then we'll have a conversation about it. But this was a little bit different. So why don't you tell the story about where you was digging and who the potential owner of the farm was, and how that all played out that day.
Well, the last few times I've been going over there, I've been going to help the owner who's collected antiques from 1700s, and he's completely filled this farm with this stuff. And now he's sold the farm to my cousin. He's got to get it all out. So I've been going over pretty much every day after work all summer, and along with working 6 days a week. So I haven't been much digging. So I'll beat him over there, and I'll go hit down by the river, and that's where that nice big Real air come from.
Oh, hang on.
Or am I still froze?
Nope, you're okay.
Oh, there it is. It's just a little behind.
Oh, ain't that beautiful?
Right in front of his house. I got the second flying eagle the next week I went, and then after 4 hours of just going around everywhere, that little critter popped up.
Okay, hang on, coming back.
There we go.
Hey, now that's going to be kind of hard to see right there. So my interpretation is that's a cufflink, correct?
Yep.
And tell everybody what the initials on that cufflink say.
JA. I don't know if you can see it better that way. No, I'm going to try to get her in there. I've been practicing this.
Up a little bit.
But it's
there you go.
Solid gold JA on it. And I took a picture first and sent it to the owner because he's like the historian around here and does all the newspaper articles. And he said, it says JA on it. It says, that's a direct link to John Adams, the second president. And so that's what I'm thinking. This is John Adams. And I don't know how many people I actually texted right after you besides him, but I was showing Bobby, the little blonde-haired guy, goes hunting with me all the time because he couldn't go because he had a Christmas party at 11 o'clock. He tends to miss all the good hunts. So I start Googling stuff about John Adams, and prior to John Adams, his family owned the farm, and probably an uncle or something, but it was Joseph Adams. So that was the direct link he was talking about, not the president. So my heart broke when he said that, but it was still kind of cool to find something gold on that farm. The farm's loaded with history around here, and I've hunted on it for years and had no idea. That's the bad part about it all. But
now, the first thing everybody asks is on something like that, it's a gold cufflink, and it's not. It doesn't look like it was directly manufactured. So, what kind of signal was that, and what machine were you on?
That was a 50, and that was the first 50 I dug all day because they used to use the punt guns out there, and you'd find the great big punt gun casings and stuff like that, and those little lead balls are 50s and 51s. We dig a ton of them.
Is that
Yeah,
like a
the first
Manicore or a Deus?
Deus 2. Yeah.
Deus 2. So
Yeah.
a 50 on the Deus 2, and you didn't have really any expectation when you started digging it that it'd be gold, did you?
No, I hadn't found anything all day. That was the very first thing I found. That was decent enough to put in my pocket. That was 4 hours of digging.
So that thing looks like it's got a very nice, and it's kind of hard to see on the camera here, but
Yeah.
the initials are very nicely inscribed into it, but it looks kind of crude in manufacturing. What do you think about that, William?
Yeah.
Well, it could be that the goldsmith wasn't as skilled as you'd hope, but what's it look like on the back of it?
There we go.
Just one loop brazed on. Yeah, I mean
Not
the oval forms of these were later than the octagonal ones, so that'd be right in the late 17s and early 18s. I would think that you'd start to see the oval forms like that.
Yeah. Pretty crude looking on the back. Like I said, finding gold was just a trip.
Yeah, I mean that's super cool. I mean when you text me that picture and then you kind of went through it a little bit before you had your information, I was fired up. I was going, oh my gosh, look at that. I was like, I just couldn't believe it. Couldn't fathom such a deal. But still, 300-year-old gold that's inscribed that can directly link to somebody in that kind of shape. Well, gold's not going to tarnish, but that's just unheard of, right? Just things that are that perfect out of the ground that's been there that long.
I shined her up while the guy met me there. He was on his way, and I was sitting there shining her on my pant leg and trying to get her all shiny like a gold ring. He's like, "Oh no, stop!" He like died, but he's probably going to take this, and this will probably be a part of the farm sites museum piece or whatever. He's got most of my stuff now because a lot of my stuff has come from there in the last year and a half or 2 years. But that's
so you're
part of it.
So your museum sticking it, right?
Yep, I think so. Just for that
farm.
That farm is loaded with years and years of history.
Yeah, that's just I mean that's pretty much that's almost like a dream find. I can say that an inscribed piece of gold in any fashion that can directly give you a pretty good time frame is probably almost the equivalent of a gold coin, right? Especially something that much older. Is that your favorite find ever?
I got the one George Washington inaugural button. That's pretty well. And he took that. He paid me for that. He bought that from me, and it was only half of it.
So you found half of the GW button, and wow, that's cool. At least you got paid for it.
Yeah, one of the rare Independence buttons, but it was chewed up pretty bad. I've been back to that place many a time trying to find some more of it. But it's neat how they're all connected to Washington and all the Philadelphia people and all that stuff back and forth so much. And how many books we got. Just go anywhere to a bookstore and you find history about Somerset County in this area back in the 1700s, 1600s.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you told me that I was stoked, and then I asked William to come on again today, and I thought, man, let you show it to him and let him get his first thought on it, because he's produced this awesome book that's really it's really helped a ton of detectorists, and our hobby's such a small niche, and then to have kind of like, we'll say, a Bible in that sense for the U.S. relics and stuff like that, it makes it that much better. Going back to like just really fast there, going back to like the military and rounds, and everybody loves the Civil War III ring bullets. Is there any more really interesting rounds that you can find from early on, or is everything pretty much that area later?
Well, I mean, some of my favorite bullets are like, you got like Sharps variants and 3-piece Shaler bullets, and there's so many different rounds that happened during the Civil War eras, Civil War years, and there was a real incentive to try to get better bullets and better weaponry, during the war. But I think some of the coolest things that I like are the early pinfire cartridges, which just look like a normal bullet cartridge, but they've got a little pin in the top of it. And, those are some early, the very brief transitional rounds, before they did, rim fires and center fires. So I think those are pretty neat.
Yeah, I love anything to do with the military. That's why the military buttons, they're among my favorite finds. Rachel's talking about the quality of the book. This book is so well made. It is so well put together, and it's very much worth the money. Just a couple of things. I know that there are still copies available if anybody wants to get them. Somebody post Buckleboy's link in the chat in here to get a hold of him, so that if you're interested in one of these books. But I do got a little tidbit that we've worked out, kind of a little deal here. So anybody that wants to look at one before they buy it, maybe test the waters out a little bit. Here in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be at Florida Hunt 11, and I will have some copies on site if anybody wants to buy them. I thought it would be a great idea to bring some down to the event so that everybody could kind of get a feel for it. Obviously, I'm going to take my own and let everybody kind of look through it if you kind of see it's something that you want. Because sometimes buying a book, the cost is a little high, you might think. But once you go through this book, you're going to realize that it's worth every single penny if you're out metal detecting every, so often and you need help with your relics. So Florida Hunt 11 here in a couple weeks. We'll definitely be there, and I'll have some copies for sale because I conned Buckleboy into sending me some stuff without making me pay for it right yet. So you guys better help me out and buy a couple of books. So
yeah, thanks for being a good ambassador. The important thing is that these books get out to people.
Yeah, because when they're gone, they may be gone, right? I mean,
there's no guarantee that there's ever going to be a reprint. So we don't know at this point.
So yeah, and because I ran into that with there's a couple other books. I think there's a button book that's like that's out there that I tried to find that was going for like $160 a copy because there was no more reprints of it.
Yeah, the Tice book now is like $250 or $300, which is crazy. I think I bought mine for maybe $69 or $79, and that's just absolutely nuts because, of course, there was a limited print run, and as soon as the demand kept up, and as soon as they were gone, then the prices started going astronomical because people, companies knew that they could price gouge it.
Yeah, absolutely. The timepieces was another section of the book, and the timepieces, and then the non-metallic items. What's your greatest takeaway about pocket watches, clocks, and stuff like that? Talk a little bit about writing that chapter and some of what went into that.
Yeah, well, it's weird because it's like when you're doing a book like this, you don't want to. I mean, you don't come at it as like I'm an expert in all these things, or you're not. You're just there's nobody that could be. What you're trying to do is you're trying to learn as much as you can about each section that you're focusing on. Then you write that section, then you move on to the next thing that you maybe don't know as much about as you should. And there are things that, there are relics that I was like, oh, I really love this relic. So I could have written about buttons for forever. I could have written about, suspender buckles forever because I really like those finds. But, some of these things like marbles, like China doll arms and legs, those were things that I really didn't know a whole lot about. And so, it just takes a lot of time and effort and contacting people who know a lot about those things and having those conversations to be able to get in on that. What was your question again? I already forgot.
Which part? Talk a little bit about writing the timepiece section, and then going a little bit into the non-metallic finds.
Yeah. So the timepiece section, like one of the cool takeaways about that is, when you find a pocket watch key, you realize that they started migrating in the mid 1800s, around the end of the Civil War, they were starting to migrate to stem wind pocket watches, where you would just like set it from the stem, from the crown, and also wind it from the crown. And so, when you find a pocket watch key, that's generally speaking, that's from like pre-Civil War, roughly speaking, and people had those older pocket watches, like they passed them down as heirlooms. So you still continue to find keys throughout the 1800s, and probably even into the 1900s, truth be told. But when you find one of those keys, you're likely dealing with an earlier watch. But when you find one of those that doesn't have a a place for that key to go, or it's a stem wind, then you know that that's a later pocket watch, which is kind of cool way to think about that. And the other thing about keys that you can kind of tell about is that they had these kind of double-ended crank style keys that almost look like a T with like a little piece up here where you kind of ratchet it around like that. And those are generally from like Verge Fusee escapement pocket watches, where there's like this little tiny chain. It's like little tiny, like there's a really cool video that I should probably share for you to put in the link of this live stream, where this guy does pocket watch restorations. But this chain I'm talking about, like each link is maybe 2 millimeters wide. And they made this in the 1700s, you know, and that's pretty wild. This little chain that basically wraps around a cylinder. And that's what that type of Verge Fusee was, what it was called. So a lot of times when you get those crank style keys, you're dealing with like 1700s pocket watches, which were really expensive to purchase and own.
Yeah, clocksmithing goes back. I don't even know when it really starts, right? I never really looked back to the beginning on when we had clocks. I'm not really sure about the beginning. I would assume that it's late 16, early 1700s era.
It might be a little earlier than that. I want to say that, you know, they had town clocks, you know, back in maybe even the 1400s or so. And I think like town halls and church spires and things like that. I think generally town halls in Europe were the ones that had those. And that was because nobody really could afford to have a personal timepiece, you know, but then the costs fell and people started to do that. But even in the 1700s, like people would have fake pocket watches, you know, going to various vest pockets, and one real pocket watch, you know, because they wanted to appear like they had money. But they really could only afford to have one pocket watch and really only needed one.
Wow. I never really thought about it, you know, so people actually carried fakes to protect the fact that they had one generational piece, right? Because I mean, those are things that were handed down for generation to generation from father to son, yada yada yada. So those are things that were the most treasured. So I guess I can understand it. But man, how smart would it be to carry a fake wallet in New York City today, right?
No kidding. The other thing that's really cool about those pocket watches is like people, you know, kind of everybody else calls something a fob, but you know, pocket watch fob could have really been anything. It didn't have to be like a piece of metal with a slot in the top. It could have been, you know, a hold coin. It could have been a braided piece of hair from a loved one who was deceased. In Victorian times, that wasn't unusual. It could have been just about anything. And you would just basically use that keepsake to pull your watch out of the pocket. And those vest pockets were so small that basically, because watches were valuable, that the watch would fit so snugly down that you really couldn't get a finger in to get the watch out. So that fob really was what you grabbed to pull the watch out of that pocket with, because you really couldn't have gotten it out of there easily otherwise.
Yeah. So Rob said, I got my great grandfather's gold Illinois watch company pocket. I had a fob that said Knights of Pythias. I've never heard of that one.
Knights of Pythias. Yeah. That's one of those fraternal organizations. I want to imagine that pocket watch was from like 1885 to 95 or so. Probably Illinois Watch Company was huge during those years. But Knights of Pythias was a fraternal organization last quarter of the 1800s and into the early 1900s. They had all of the regalia. They had the uniforms and the swords and the sword belts and all of that stuff. So pretty cool.
I agree.
No, the women's shoe buckles on page 115 helped me ID one that I've dug again. Thought it was some sort of sash buckle.
Very cool. Thanks, Marty.
Yeah, and the best part about getting the book, one of the first things that I did once I got it is that I've got a couple cases of, so I got some nice finds right in my cabinet here, but I got a couple plastic cases that are just loaded down with different things that I don't know quite what it was. I got plastic totes and tubs of things that I don't know exactly what it was. And I started looking through the book and, you know, just trying to piece it together. And it got me pretty familiar with the book pretty quick, but I didn't really figure out anything special. But I just know that the buckles, especially after I got the Book of Buckles, there's a lot of different manufacturers. There's a lot of different styles for different applications. Talk about one of the widest subjects in metal detecting is a buckle, honestly, right?
Yeah.
Oh, always happy to find them.
Knee buckles, shoe buckles. Some of the shoe buckles were very, what really prompted the very articulate shoe buckles from back in the day? I know it has to do with wealth. I got that part of it. But, there's a lot of time and effort that went into some of those. Uh, any thoughts?
A lot of this seemed to be like imported fashions, right? So we looked to England for years. As an English colony, we really had to. I mean, we didn't have to, but we did. So a lot of the fashions came from England. And even, after the tumultuous period with England of the 1770s through the 1810s, still, into the Victorian era, we were back to English fashion again, and particularly Victorian fashion. And so a lot of these things were influenced from that. And a lot of the buckles were imported from there. The chapes were made in one place or one location. The buckle frames were machined in another spot. They were usually assembled somewhere else and packed over and sent over to the colonies. So it's pretty wild when you think about all the journeys that all those different component parts took.
Yeah, that's still one of my favorite parts of the whole relic world is that, you get something that comes from, I don't know, somebody immigrated from France and they've got something that was made a certain way. And then somebody in a village that they ended up in sees how it's made and they blacksmith and create their own version of it, or, and then just how things took off. And then once the country got, highly industrialized, then you started seeing a lot of stuff. I guess you're getting closer to the 1900s where there was a lot of advertising used. Um, you know, just going through this whole book. What is your favorite thing to find metal detecting? Because we've talked about the book and we've talked about relic identification, but I know you like nickels. But what is your favorite thing to find, and what are you looking for that you haven't found in that area of yours?
Well, what I really want is a gold coin. This let's see, this upcoming December, in less than a year, it's going to be 40 years in the hobby and no gold coin. I just would like one at some point. But if it's meant to be, it'll happen. If it's not, then I'll find other stuff. But to me, the thing that I love the most is finding something I've never found one of. It's a search and a journey, and it gets your curiosity going, and it's like finding it multiple times because you found it in the ground, right? Somehow, against all odds, you put your search coil that's this big over that one little patch of ground where that item is and found it, decided to dig and located it. And then you bring it home and it starts a new process of trying to figure out what it is and what it means. And, I would say that a lot of times I go out, I find something that I've never seen. That's part of the great thing about this hobby is that it's always surprising. Even just recently, and I'll share this, with you. This is coming out here soon on my channel in a couple weeks. But I was out here a couple days ago and I dug this, and so I'm not quite sure what model that is because it's got these weird set screws up here that you can see, and I'm trying to identify it. I know it's a pistol of some sort. I know that it was a rimfire, most likely, because it has a channel here to go into a cylinder. So it was fed a cartridge, used probably a 22, little lightweight boot pistol. But I'm amazed that it did not get bent up by the plow. And I'm just trying to figure out what model that is, and I'm still not able to figure it out. I've spent 10 hours trying to figure out exactly what model that is, and I still can't find a match. So these types of weapons come from an era when there's so many gun manufacturers. I mean, it's like the button manufacturers. There's so many of them, and it's like the 1850s, 60s, 70s, especially, until after the desire for, the demand for weapons subsided after the Civil War. A lot of those gun manufacturers actually went into making toys. People don't realize that that the cap pistols, from the 40s, 50s, even up into today, that little strip of cap, basically that was a Civil War era idea with the Maynard tape primer. So the idea that you would fire it and you would never have to put a percussion cap on because you had this little strip that would have the percussive material enclosed, fulminate of mercury, whatever it was. And so, it wasn't very successful as a military weapon, but it became a toy afterwards. So all these gun manufacturers had to do something to survive after the Civil War, and a lot of them went to toys. But there were just so many different manufacturers, and so I'm having a lot of difficulty IDing that pistol.
What's the base metal on that? It looked green.
Yeah, it's a brass frame. Yeah, it's a solid brass frame, and it sounded great on the metal detector. It had an iron barrel and an iron cylinder, and probably some sort of nice like rosewood or oak grips or something.
So it was more of a decorative dress pistol, maybe.
I think somebody just wanted some personal defense and either kept it in their muff or kept it in their boot, or a vest pocket.
That's still really cool. I've never found the pew pew out there like that. I found toys, never quite found that. Hey, no, I gotta ask since Jerry's here. What's your big time bucket list or you're looking for? You've got a couple really good finds. So what's the next one on your list, my friend?
Yeah, I've got most of the coins, so gold coins the one I'm after too.
Yeah, I
See
think
that
that's
gold
everybody.
Hey, let's both get one this year, my friend.
It's something about gold and dirt. That's a pretty slate. But yeah, I think that should be everyone's, just because they're so rare. It'd be nice to bring some of them back. Get them in regular hands again.
Yeah, you were talking about your GW button. The political buttons throughout the eras. Those are highly sought after, and I don't find many of the older ones. I find some from the early 1900s and stuff like that, but rarely have I seen anything any older than that. Probably because they just don't survive the ground, I'd assume, right?
Yeah, most of my dandies would look great, but that poor GW, she was tore up. It was super thin, wore out, and just looked like it had been eroded away or whatever. But luckily, there's one picture. Never know what that was.
I don't know. I think the big thing is to find something that's either one of a kind or historically definitively identifiable, that has significant value or history. Those are the things. I think the word unique comes into play when it comes to metal detecting, because you're always looking for something unique. Because whenever you find something unique and you make a dang video on it, when you find something that nobody sees all the time, those are usually the ones that people like.
I found a unique one the other day before I found this gold button, and I didn't pay attention to it today. I don't know if you stick that on camera too.
Yeah, coming.
This is an Indian head penny. I don't know if you see the blanket, how thin it is.
Yeah, it looks like it was thicker on one side. Am I seeing that wrong?
No, she's super thin. They had, I just looked it up. They had some kind of real thin planchet. It was heavily struck. I mean, the coin looks almost brand new, other than it's been rippled.
Wow.
I don't know if you can see that real good, but even the back, the 1 cent, and it's yellow. And that's kind of how it come out. But look how thin that thing is. I thought it was a real when I first dug it up.
Yeah, I always like the IHPs because there's such a broad spectrum. Oh, and that bleeds to a whole other question. There's such a broad spectrum, because you can dig an IHP that is the most beautiful emerald green, right? The color just is tantalizing, and then you dig some that are a complete chocolate brown, right? Yes, and then you get some that come out of the ground and they almost look black. I know it's the different levels of oxidation, but I wonder if the material level was like, hey, we chinsed out a little bit this year. It's not 100% or not 90% copper. Maybe we'll throw a little nickel in with these. I never really know, but I just noticed that I see so many different variations of color on an IHP that it's kind of strange.
Yep, it's funny how you see some of them of the same year, and some of them can't even make out what it is.
And then you get some that are ate up like a zinc penny, right?
Yep. The other
I
ones
mean,
had their mint condition. Right
and
out
then
the gate.
yeah, that just blows me away. I guess it goes to how deep it is and what chemical in the dirt. I mean, what has laid on it for years.
Yeah.
But definitely sometimes the older nickels are that way. Is there? Do you got any? So, how many copies of that book you got left? Are you still holding on to a few?
I've still got a few. Yeah, yeah. I ended up, when they first arrived, it was like 2 pallets worth of books, and now I'm down at below 1 pallet. So that's a lot better, for my sanity.
For your sanity. I mean, just keeping them stored. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's a lot. Rachel, have a good night. Thank you all in because tonight's not gonna be one of those super long ones today. I wanted to kind of just get through here and have a good meat and potatoes live stream tonight. Make it right at that 1 hour mark. So I definitely appreciate it. I'm gonna go through really quick, and we're gonna check the like total out tonight. And if between the two, the vertical and the horizontal, if we hit that target number, we're gonna drop a gift card here at the end of the day. If anybody wants a book that's going to be at Florida Hunt 11, you can reserve one of the 5 that I think I'm going to have with me. I'll have 6. I'm going to take mine too. But if you want to do that, that's great. If you want to hit Buckleboy up and buy one of those books, I highly recommend it because when they're gone, you may regret it because you may not get a chance to see him again. I don't know if he's going to go through the whole sales portion of this again. I think he's lost some years of his life dealing with the stress of moving books.
I'm getting gray now, man. I'm getting gray.
Me too. That's why I shave. If nobody knows,
I'll be right there with you in a bit.
That gray is what you don't like and you want to keep going. But all that being said, let's see, what was I looking for here? Man, I lost my train of thought. What I just say I was going to do? Oh, check the likes. I'm going to check these likes out really fast, and let's see where we made it to today. Because I know that when you don't advertise a giveaway, it's a lot harder to grow a crowd. But we got 50. Well, I tell you what, if we can master up 10 more likes and get to that 75 number, that would be fantastic. I see 47 and 1. We need about 10 more likes to get it there, and you got 3 minutes to do so. So if anybody hasn't smashed the like, please do so. And if you want to go check out some channels, these YouTube channels for these two guys are pretty good. The Other Side of the Boat and Buckleboy. So be sure to go check all of that stuff out. Everybody's social media. And also, if you're looking for any kind of products, no advertising today, but the stuff that I got in my description are people that have been really good to me. And those are the companies that I really like to use. I'm definitely a Nokta Macro fan, Nokta fan, and Predator Tools. They're high on my list. So if you want something, just stop in there and hook them up. I'm going to go through this one more time. And if it's not close enough, we're going to call it a day. And I'm going to say shame on you folks. Oh, that got us a little bit closer. And let's see. 77. Oh, there you go. Just like that. All I got to do is ask it for it at the very end and we get there. So I've got a StreamYard giveaway tool up. If anybody wants a chance to win a gift card today, we're gonna make it easy and we're gonna honor our friend Jerry here.
No.
I'm gonna make it funny. Oh, let's get it here. Let's get the giveaway tool. Get ready to rock and roll. It will be hashtag. And only because I'm being a troll. All right, 1 second. Here we go. I'm trolling you folks. I'm just telling you right now. Enjoy writing this in the chat. It's gonna make me laugh. Hashtag The Other Side of the Boat.
I appreciate it.
No, it's good to talk to you. You're gonna have to come back up here when we got a full hour because where you're at as far as the history goes just absolutely makes it digging a good adventure for you. Love farm fields.
Took us about an hour to figure out how to get everything hooked up together, so we're ready finally.
All right, everybody gets it in there. You're going to have just a couple minutes to hit that out. Also, everybody, please be sure, and if nothing else, stop in and tell Buckleboy thank you for putting this book out for us. There's a lot of years and a lot of research and a lot of effort to make our lives in the hobby a lot easier. So, you know, a thank you goes a long way. I know a lot of people don't say thanks anymore, but a thank you is definitely needed. And I'm telling you guys, when these books are gone, I have a feeling that they're not coming back. Hopefully they will, but you might wish that you had one in 10 years.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
All I know is that button book I tried to get, and I still can't get a copy of that thing without spending an arm and a leg. The Buckle book was pretty reasonable.
Yeah, Greenlight Publishing is pretty reasonable. That does the Buckle book. It's weird, you know. It's like you think about all the books that you'd have to have all this knowledge at your fingertips, and it's, you know, thousands of dollars to buy a book on every single thing, you know. So it's really valuable to have everything in one place.
There you go. I knew I'd get somebody to say thanks.
Hey, thanks, Beagles.
Yeah. Brian, if anybody's going to dig the gold coin out of persistency, it will be Brian. Telling you, that boy he's going to dig the gold coin, because I've never seen somebody so determined to dig everything out of the ground. And when I say everything, that he digs it all.
That's not a bad trait to have, you know. Some of the rarest things you will never ever understand what the signal is, because you've never found anything like that before. So it's good to dig. Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? If nobody believes it or not, if you have a stressful work life or whatnot, digging holes and listening just for the faintest of beep in the headphone is probably one of the most relaxing things I've ever done in my life. And that's a reason why I will do it for the rest of my life.
Amen.
Yeah, you say it, buddy, because that's we got to have a little bit of peace in there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We have got just about, let's see where we're at. I'll get the screen share up.
See all the new names.
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah, they're coming in now.
Yeah, that's when they show up. That's for sure. I don't care. A lot of them are usually here anyway. Oh, no. Oh, good. Still here. Oh, no. I screwed up. Okay. I think I just erased it for everybody. That's really good. Hold on a second. Let's do it again. My bad. You got 2 minutes to do it, and we're just gonna have hashtag. There you go. 2 minutes. Timer starting now. I ain't gonna keep everybody all night. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to delete it.
It's too easy to do such a thing.
It was very easy to make a mistake.
Yeah.
When I see 40 or 50, I'm hitting it, just so you guys know. So any thoughts of writing another book while we're waiting?
Well, you know, this would be a good one to write a sequel to, because your work's never done. You know, it's just like, even down to the wire, I was putting stuff in, and finally Butch was like, you know, we're done. Like, don't put any more in. You know, I stuffed everything in. We'd made changes to chapters to accommodate new relics and stuff that I just figured out. And then we had a additional relics section at the end, which was a catch-all. And then, you know, your work's never done. There's just too much.
All
right, we're getting really close. I got 36 entries, and you've got 1 minute and counting to get hashtag BB in the chat, and then I'm going to hit the draw button so I don't screw it up again. If anybody that wins, you got 60 seconds to chat and let me know that you're here. If not, I'm rolling it again. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, because you shouldn't have gotten nowhere, and you should be able to type, hey, I'm here, in a matter of seconds. All right, here we go. We're almost there. Clock's about to turn over 10:05. I think, anyway. Yeah, it is. There it is. All right, last chance to go. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Good luck, everybody. Amazon gift card on behalf of Jerry, the other side of the boat, and Buckleboy. 3, 2, 1. Hit it. Who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? Coming down to the wire. It's gonna be Silver Wishes.
Silver Wishes.
I know she's around.
Buy silver right on Amazon.
We all have wishes of silver right now. Let's go.
The prices are flying, yeah.
It's crazy. Silver Wishes, just drop me a quick chat. Let me know that you're still around.
There she is.
There she is, right there. All right. My email is going across the bottom of the screen. Send me what email address that you buy from Amazon from. And just drop me an email, and I will drop you a gift card probably tomorrow. And as always, William, thank you for coming on today. I didn't even get through everything I had today. I still got another sheet that I didn't even touch yet. I thought what I had in my front of me was going to be enough for an hour. So end of February, March.
Yeah, man, anytime. Yeah. Happy
you got
to,
some
Shane.
books there. We'll get you back in here. Everybody, thank these guys. Stop by. And it's a shame that Jerry did not record finding that cuff link. So
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did?
Come out. Oh yeah, I got it all.
I thought you didn't. Oh no.
Yeah, I pulled it up, and I haven't put a video out or anything yet. Just I ain't had time to do any of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I got the moment where I drop it because it's gold, and then I get the camera on it right away.
Well, be sure to look for that, because Jerry doesn't put out a lot of content, but usually when he does, it's well worthwhile to see. Well, congratulations on that gold. That's amazing.
Yeah, congrats, Jerry. That's really awesome.
That's as close to a gold coin as one of us may ever get. So I hope not. I hope we all find one, but I don't know. That's a tough one.
It's there somewhere. Just gotta dig.
It's out there somewhere, and I'm going to keep digging.
Just gotta dig.
Everybody else, thank you for stopping in and supporting. Go through the description. If there's anything that you want in there, please feel free to hit those up. Much love to you all, and I will see you guys on probably next Thursday. Peace out. Thanks, guys. Oh, the Sharks are going to play again because I haven't got a new outro. So